So if you saw my previous video, you'll know that the first time I opened Premiere Pro, I was like this. And if you thought that the layout of Premiere Pro wasn't self-explanatory, then get ready for After Effects, what I like to call Adobe Unexplanatory Layouts 2 Electric Boogaloo. I'm not kidding. Perhaps if you're a Premiere Pro user, when you open After Effects, you think surely some of your knowledge in Premiere will transfer over to After Effects. It just doesn't work like that. At least it didn't for me. But worry not, because today I'm going to go through 5 things that every After Effects beginner should know. Hi, I'm Alex from Sleeping Giant Media. I'm the Senior Creative Executive, and let's get some learning about After Effects. Let's start by loading it up. See, I'm using Adobe After Effects 2021. I'm using it on a MacBook Pro, but any of the tips that I go through today will work just as fine on a Windows computer. So welcome, this is After Effects. We're going to start by just clicking on New Project, and that's going to open up this screen here. The first thing you want to do is open a new composition. I'm going to explain how After Effects works. You have your project, and then your project is made up of compositions. A composition could be an entire timeline of a video containing multiple parts, multiple video files, multiple audio files. And a massive project could actually be made up of multiple compositions, which you can click through and edit in their own little package, and then have as one layer in a larger project. Does that make sense? I feel like that doesn't make sense. You'll see what I mean. So to begin with, let's start on a new composition. That's going to bring up this window here. Here we can set the dimensions of our video. We can set the frame rate, leave us 25 for now. We're going to use a 1080 by 1920 composition. And then you can set the actual duration of your timeline here. So let's say we just want to do a 10-second video. I can put that in there, 10 second, and leave the background color as black. And when we click OK, that's going to load up our blank composition. So for my first tip, let's go through the layout. Here, what I have is After Effects and the way it's set out. It's pretty scary, right? It is scary, but it's okay. You got me. I know that's not reassuring. So let's talk about the layout. Here is your project window here. And that's going to contain all of your media that you import into After Effects. So let's start by importing some media. Here's a couple of files that I have prepared earlier. So if I double click on that, so with those in our project folder, we can go ahead and click and drag this down into our timeline, which is down here, and let go. And that's going to position the video in our timeline. We can actually see that the video here is bigger than the dimensions that we set out in the composition, which you can change at any point by clicking composition and then composition settings, and you can edit it there. But for now, I'm just going to click on the corner edge here, hold down shift just so it keeps its aspect ratio, and then just drag until it's the right size. So here we go. As we set out before, the duration of this timeline is 10 seconds. So that's going to play this video, and then it will automatically loop back to the beginning. If you want the duration to be longer, you can adjust it using the composition settings as well. I'm also going to drag this one down here, and whatever layer is on top is the one that's visible. So you can see I've dragged this group of flying birds over, but we can't see at the moment. If I just simply drag that on top, they'll become visible there, although they're very small. So now that those elements are in our project, let's explain the rest of the layout. So these are the files that are in our timeline at the moment, and this is the bar that represents the length of our timeline. This is 10 seconds. You can zoom into this down here if you wanted to go a little bit more granular. You might be looking at this and thinking, where's the play, where's the pause, where's anything? Simply hitting space on the timeline will play the video, but if you do want to have access to the controls like frame forwards, you just simply go in this preview window up here, first frame, next frame, and everything you want there. Now, an important thing to mention is resolution, because After Effects needs a lot of power. I'm not kidding. So something that is important to adjust is resolution for your playback. So here, down here, you'll find your resolution for when your composition is paused. So at this point it's not moving, and we'll see how that renders. I've got it set to full, but you can click there, have it full, half, third, quarter, or you can set it for a custom one if you want. So if I change that to third, it's actually going to make the resolution of my image a third on this paused frame. But if I set it to full, it will display it as full. Simple. What about when we play it back? Here it's actually in the preview window and the resolution here, so we can set that to a third, and then when we actually play our timeline, it's going to require less of the computer's power. Okay, so now these elements are in our project, let's look at controls. So in order to edit the size, the position of our various elements, we're going to need some shortcuts. So it's quite simple, you just follow along with me. So I've got these birds here that are flying across here, and I want them to be slightly bigger because, as you can see, they are quite small at the moment. What you want to do is press S on your keyboard, which will bring up your scale, and then you can actually click here and drag, and that will scale your item. Equally, you can press P for position, and you can position the X-axis here and the Y-axis there by clicking and dragging. Alternatively, if you actually click on the item itself with position selected, you can actually click and drag the item itself if that's easier. To change the rotation, you'd press R, obviously, you see there's a pattern here, and to change the opacity, you press T for topacity. Alternatively, you can also access all of these commands at once by clicking the little drop down arrow, which will give you all the properties for that one layer. So you can see here, you can set the anchor point, position, scale, rotation, and opacity. So my third point to talk about is animation. So what if you want to change this position over the course of your timeline? So if you watch my previous video on Premiere, or if you actually know Premiere yourself, it's a very similar concept to setting stopwatch keyframes between one point and another point. So let's try that out. Let's say I want my birds to fly from left to right over the course of this 10-second video. So what I will do is I'll scroll to the beginning. I'm gonna select this stopwatch here, and that's gonna give me a keyframe here for this position, for this marker. I'm now gonna drag along the X-axis until the birds are about here. And then I'm gonna scroll to the end of my timeline, and I'm going to just change the position marker, and when I do that, it's automatically going to create a keyframe you'll be able to see here. And I'm going to just click here actually, hold shift so it moves along just the one axis rather than moving up or down. Hold shift and then move it to the end. And what After Effects is going to do is it's automatically going to animate from left to right the position of those birds. And equally with scale, if I want them to be bigger here, I can set their scale by clicking the stopwatch there, setting it to be bigger, scrolling along, making them smaller, and then it's going to animate them getting smaller. That's the basics of animation. So the next thing I want to talk about is layers. Now I don't know if layers is the correct term, maybe channels or whatever, but hopefully you'll see what I mean. So in Premiere, you'll notice that you can actually you've got a video channel here, and you can put a video, then a gap, and then a video, or you can do the same video, create a cut here, and then have another one. In After Effects, it's not quite that easy. Like, let's say if I want the group of flying birds to be here on the same level, you can't. Every single element needs to be on its own layer, so it has its own properties, its own everything. And After Effects isn't really intended to be a video editing program, and you'll see why, because if I split the layer here to create a cut in it, it has to be on a brand new layer. So if you do a video edit where you need to cut out things like ums and ahs, you're going to want to do that in Premiere, because in After Effects you're going to end up with millions and millions of layers on top of each other. My recommendation is edit video in Premiere Pro and then bring it into After Effects to add some effects afterwards. So let me just rewind a little bit. Let me just teach you how I did that. So if I wanted to split our layer, I would scroll to the point that I'd want it to be, and I would hold Command, Shift, and D. That will split our layer here. And then you can either delete that to cut it at that point. But what happens is that After Effects remembers everything that makes up that image. So actually, even though I've cut it here, I can drag from this point to the end of the actual video file. And the kind of cool thing with After Effects is that if you were to drag in an audio file, it doesn't have to sit like in Premiere. You have your video channels and then a gap and then your audio channels. In After Effects, you can have one stacked on top of the other. So as you go through your timeline, you can actually see audio mixed along with video. And some more shortcuts for you. If you do create a cut in your video, you can jump the element in your timeline to the point that you're at in your timeline using the square bracket. So if you want it to be at the beginning, you can set it by doing the open square brackets. If you want to set it to the end, you can do the close square brackets. Okay, so the final tip I want to talk about when your video is done and ready to export is obviously exporting. So with this in our timeline, let's cover this step. So at the moment, this blue bar here represents everything that's going to export from our timeline, and we can adjust this either by moving it manually, or we can scroll to a point in our timeline and press B for beginning and N for end. I don't think it stands for anything. They're just next to each other, so it makes it easier. And that will set the amount that is exported. If you want to make sure that everything is exported from your timeline, just make sure that everything is selected like that. And then we want to go File, Export, and Add to Render Queue. Now, something that's important to mention is that After Effects itself cannot render into H.264 or MP4 files. It can only export into things like movie files and stuff that are quite large. They can have transparency though. So if you are looking to export into a movie file, you can obviously go in here, you can set these different settings. If you want your video to have transparency, make sure it's set to QuickTime and your channel's RGB plus alpha. And if you do want to render in that file, you can just hit OK, set where you want its output to, and then hit render there. If you do want to render into H.264 or MP4, which is what I do most of the time, I would go Export and add to Adobe Media Encoder queue, which is going to open Adobe Media Encoder. And with it here, you can then set your various settings. So you can set the location it will output to. You can see mine's automatically set to export it to H.264. With the video settings, you can set the dimensions here, render at maximum depth, use maximum render quality, hit OK, and then press play at the top, which will begin the render of your video. Now, as I said, After Effects is quite processing heavy. This one's simple and it's 10 seconds long. It's still going to take a minute to render that. So if you've got a 2-minute timeline with lots of different elements that I imagine is going to be more complicated than this, be prepared to sit and wait. Okay, so that's everything from me about After Effects. Well, not everything, but all the basics at least. If I missed anything basic that you were hoping I'd cover and I didn't, then just let me know in the comments and I'll try and shoot back a response with a quick answer. I hope you enjoyed that and you were able to learn something about After Effects. It's a fantastic program, very versatile, and it means that you can add a whole wealth of different things that will take your videos absolutely to the next level. In the meantime, if you want to see more videos like this, if you haven't already seen my introduction to Premiere Pro video, make sure you go to our channel and check that out. Give us a like, give us a subscribe, all of that stuff will make it worth your time with fantastic content released every week, and that's a promise. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time for another Giant Wednesday Creative.